No problem.
Are we live? Are we live? We're alive. We're alive. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Lovely to see you. It's working. First time round. I just want to say hello to the people that are in the room. Can you see the chat this time, Becca? Because you're on your laptop.
I can now. Yes.
Yay!
I can see
Awesome.
Aquamarine 18.
Yep, Laura's here. Simon's here. Hazel Jane Tarot. Our L. Christine's here. Christina is here. I think I saw Naomi. Hi, Naomi. Read on Shy One. Oh, what a wonderful name. I like that. So, yeah, my book is half in English and half in Spanish. Hello, Lisa. Welcome. Yeah, a success. First time round. I was kind of dreading that it wasn't going to work again and we'd have all this drama of having to reschedule and then I spend the whole week stressing about it. Yeah, for the first time for a while where we've not had any actual problems. So Read on Shy One says, I have another collection of hers laid out the same way, but in French. Beautiful. Debbie's here. Hello, Debbie Doobie-doo. So yeah, the poems are the same. They're just translated. So hello. Welcome to the August installment of the Literary Witches Project with myself and Becca of Becca Talks and Tarot. Say hi, Becca.
Hi, Becca.
I knew you were going to do that. Would you, Becca, like to tell everyone, even though you probably know, right, folks, who we've been reading this month?
Well, Kelly shuffled the deck and she picked out. Now, your pronunciation of this is so much nicer than mine. Is Alejandra Pizarnik. Have I pronounced that correctly?
I think, yeah, it's Alejandra Pizarnik, from what I've heard Spanish speakers say.
So this was her card. This was the card that we picked.
I don't know what I've put.
The key word, funny enough, for this card was solitude. So she is pretty heavy. She was born in Russia to Jewish parents in Argentina. She was educated in both Yiddish and Spanish, so she was bilingual, which was pretty good. Her poetry of imaginistic purity and surrealist influence summons themes of silence, absence, madness, death, again and again. So
yeah, it was pretty heavy stuff. So thank you for that little introduction. I have to admit, and I know you said as much yourself, Becca, I really struggled with this one, and this is the first one I've Eileen Chang's story I struggled with at the beginning to get into it, but I did get into it in the end. But I really struggled with this one just overall, and I think it's just partly where my headspace is, because I've been feeling quite, there's a pandemic, there's a lot going on, with the environment, there's a lot going on politically all around the world. Just everything is 2020 is a trash fire, essentially. So on top of that,
sure is.
It's a lot, right, to have this very intense poetry.
Well, yeah, because if you're in a particular headspace, and generally when I'm feeling like that, when I'm feeling what's the word? How do I put it? When I'm struggling with my own kind of like mental health, which I do, like my depression and stuff. When you read something, usually when I'm in that kind of state, I'll read something or listen to something that's uplifting, which takes me out and out of that state. But this, as I was reading some of the poems, I could actually feel myself getting more low.
Yeah, same. It was really heavy going, and that's a shame, because I do think, like I was saying to you just before we went live, when I do the initial bio research, the little bio video that I do for each author, I try not to actually read any analysis of the stories that they've written, or of their poetry or whatever, because I'm worried that it's going to give something away. So I try to just stick to information about their life and what they've published and when. And then it's only just before we do these lives, I do a bit of extra research and see if I can find analyses of certain poems, of stories, and find reviews of them, like from newspapers and blogs and things. And actually doing that little bit of extra research this week after reading, I found it helpful, and I found it made things not necessarily make more sense, but it just made me feel less, I don't even know how to explain it. I just felt better about it. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Perfect sense.
So I'm just trying to work out which cards we've already pulled out and which we haven't. I've just made this deck into a big old mess. Oh wow! Luckily, you're pulling the next card this month, so I don't have to worry about my deck being in order.
You know what?
So
I so hope that we get something lighter. I really do. And I know that, you know, these women are remarkable, all of them, you know, particularly it's kind of an inspiration for all of us that we struggle, don't we, with all kinds of things, like, you know, domestic life, mental health wise, you know, prejudice, and there's just about every kind of angle in life covered in this deck. But
definitely,
lots of, you know,
pain, though. Lots of pain.
Yes, but that's life, right? Isn't it? You know, and I think
to the life of women.
Yeah, but not only that, they say, what's that word about art? Suffering for your art, and poetry is an art. And when these women have been in the depths of despair or whatever situation they've been in, that's where their inspirations come. And it's, instead of keeping it up here, they've put it down on paper.
Entirely. They're writing through their pain, essentially. And actually, Alejandra actually talks about how, I will share it in the description box at the end, but I found some resources, and there's actually, sorry, my phone just buzzed. Oh, it's Animal Crossing Pocket Camp saying that my furniture I've ordered is ready. Sorry, that distracted me. Where I found there was some work published by Alejandra. I think it was about 1970. And she actually wrote her own sort of introduction to it or something. And so in that, I will actually share that with you. She talks about how she writes to stay alive. Like, she writes to stop herself from taking her own life, essentially. So she's writing through her own pain. And I actually mentioned in the bio video that I made about her, where she truly believed in this whole romantic notion of that suffering is part of the artistic process. And I just really, as someone who is an artistic person, someone who is a creative, who makes their living as a creative, I just want that notion to die a death. I think it's so harmful and toxic, and we need to just not hold on to that anymore. And I get it, right? I've been in points where making art, painting, writing has helped me process what I'm going through, but at the same time, it's not the only time I'm creative, and it's not the only source. It can't be the only source of inspiration to sustain you. It's not healthy. So the book that I picked up, I don't know, you've got a digital version, haven't you? Was Extracting the Stone of Madness, Poems of 1962 to 1972. So Alejandra was in Paris, I think between 1960 and 1964. Or 1962 and 1966, I can't remember. And this is where she was writing exclusively in French. She spoke, like you said, she spoke Yiddish at home. Her parents were Jewish. They had traveled to Argentina to escape. Actually, where they're from, what was it called? It's called Rovno, and it's actually now a part of Ukraine. But there was this sort of anti-Semitic sentiment rising up. So a couple of years before Alejandra's birth, they moved to Argentina to escape that. Just as well they did, right? Because we know what happened after that. So they then obviously spoke Spanish because Argentina. But the Argentinians, and I don't know if that's true now, but back then, would like the French is the language of the arts and of high art, and because Paris was the artistic and creative capital of the world, so Paris all through the earliest to even now, we're saying, you know, now not so much, but all through, you know, the 1800s and right through the 1900s, Paris is a place that artists flock to, whether it's poets, writers, painters, sculptors, philosophers, all sorts of like slightly interesting and different people.
It's got a romantic air about it, hasn't it?
Romantic Paris, right? So I mean, I get it. I love Paris. It's a beautiful place. And so she also learned French because she was determined to move to France and work in France because she felt this pull to be in the most creative city in the world. So yeah, she spoke French, which, you know, so she's multilingual. And in Paris, she writes in French. And the sad thing is, after spending 4 years in Paris, she comes back to Argentina, back to just outside Buenos Aires, and she no longer writes in French. She just never wrote in French after that. She does translate some of her French work into Spanish, and she does take some of fragments of her French works and reuses them in her Spanish work. But all the poetry in here is translated from the Spanish. So this is her, you know, mostly.
And it does sound so much nicer in Spanish, I have to say. Kelly's got the gift of knowing some Spanish, so she can actually read it in Spanish, which is nice.
I was reading a bit the extra research that I was doing this week, and there was a lot of people commenting on how it's difficult to translate exactly what Alejandra means in her poems from the Spanish to the English, because this is always the problem. We had this obviously with Fora Faraxat, where, you know, a translation is an approximation. You can't, there's not always the same words available in the other language. And although, you know, Yvette Seagat, who translated this, by all accounts, has done a really good job. But what they talk about is the wordplay, because Alejandra uses a lot of alliteration and a lot of repetition and a lot of wordplay in her poems. And that doesn't always come across when you translate it. It doesn't work. So I would often read the Spanish out loud, then the English, and then the Spanish again. And you can see the cadence, the way that it flows is different. It still works in English, but some of it's a little confusing. But the three poems that we had that were in the book recommended by the Literary Witches book, we had Your Voice, which is very short. So I'll be able to read them, or you'll be able to read them. Party, again, a very short one. And then one that's a lot longer, which is The Dream of Death, or The Sight of the Poetical Bodies, which is actually... It's not as long as I did also read Extracting the Stone of Madness, but it's a bit the Dream of Death is a bit too long to read during a live chat. But shall I read one of the poems? I'm going to read one in Spanish just so you get the word play. En la mano crispada de un muerto, en la memoria de un loco, en la tristeza de un niño, en la mano que busca el vaso, en el vaso inalcanzable, en la sed de siempre. So that means, it's called Moradas is the name of the poem, and it's dwelling places, and the translation is in the stiff hand of a dead man, in the memory of a madman, in the sadness of a child. So that's en la tristeza de un niño, in the hand that feels for a glass, in the unreachable glass, in the endless thirst. So you get this like longing, but this like really like, oh, it's really dark and sad.
They're all like it.
Yeah, like the dead man, the madman, the sadness of a child, in the hand that feels for a glass, an unreachable glass, an endless thirst. She can't quite get to what she's getting. Like, oh my God. So yeah, that you can see how it sounds different when you hear it in the Spanish as to the English, obviously. And then in Extracting the Stone of Madness, when we talk about the repetition, for example, is it the Extracting the Stone of Madness that it's in? No, it's in the Dream of Death. There's this bit where she says, the poetical body is inherited and never exposed to the gloomy morning sun. There is a cry and a crier and an outcry and a crisis of flames. You see, there's the cry, 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 cry. With a cry and a crier and an outcry and a crisis of flames. So that's what they mean by her repetition and her wordplay, and they've managed to translate that into like that wordplay. It's clever.
It is, yeah.
So yes, what was what you there was you read a couple of different ones.
Yeah, I actually got two because I literally couldn't read anymore because it was bringing me into a really kind of dark frame of mind. So I stuck to the two because they're all, you can't find one that isn't dark. So the one that I chose was a poem called Backward at Once. This is one of them. And it reads, if I dare look on and speak, it's because of her shadow linked so gently to my name, far away in the rain, in my memory, for her burning face in my poem, which...
It sounds like a poem about loss and longing, doesn't it?
It does, but is it that? I think she's talking about, she's speaking about herself, is what I interpreted that as. Because I read that for Pizarnik, there is little hope of emerging whole, since the burning that cleanses with an inner alchemy also scalds, leaving permanent scars of despair. And then she actually writes a little bit. The name I was called by is already lost.
It's just really sad. There's what there was a review in the what was it called? It was by in the Los Angeles Review of Books in 2016, and someone paraphrases by Cesar Aria, and it says, if you spend a day with this collection, speaking of this, you cannot help but come away with a sense, to paraphrase Cesar Aria, of exhaustion, right? Not necessarily physical, but rather linguistic and poetic exhaustion, which in Pizarnik's writing is all the more serious. So that is that feeling, like I was reading a bunch of the stuff and I was like, oh God, like I feel really, oof, you know. And then there was another thing that I found in the Boston Review in 2016 when this was published, and it says Pizarnik's maximalist writing. And when they say maximalist, they're talking about not that her poems are particularly lengthy, because a lot of them are very, very short, but there's this overlaying of themes that recur and repeat throughout all her poems. So it becomes this sort of snowball, it feels like, that is sort of rolling downhill and collecting and collecting and collecting.
Yeah.
And that, you know, there's this repetition in some of her poems. Says this maximalist. So it's Pizarnik's maximalist writing shatters ideals of economy. This is not poetry that you get and then move on from. It is poetry that opens up a violent space in which you must linger and struggle. Pizarnik's poetry must be undergone. Poetry as immersive experience. And that's Joanne Goranson for the Boston Review. So that's a really good description, right? It's an experience. You don't just read it and then just go, oh, that's enough poetry for today. Like, it's a real, like, ooh, it like strips you. It feels like getting a kick in the gut. I'm just going to go through the live chat and just see what people are saying, because I think we've got some more people popping by, and just see what other people are saying about it. Kristen said, did you read the whole book or just a few poems? I ended up reading half the book, and I stopped because I was getting overwhelmed like Becca, but also I was like, if I read all the poems, there's tons of poems in this book.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to comment on any of them because they're all going to just blur in my head.
Yeah. Same way.
Hello. Let's see.
Because there was a little line that really stuck out to me, and that she says, before words can run out, something in the heart must die.
Oh, she's so sorrowful. It's really sad. Yeah. Lisa's here says hello. Kathy's here. Hello. Sunshine Dawn's here. Hello. Blue Crescent Tarot. Hello. Just dropping in to listen and hang out. Laura Aquamarine 18 says, this is the first book I truly struggled with, and I've read them all so far. Yeah, same here. Heavy reading but rhapsodic, says Hazel Jane. Jackie is here. Hello, Jackie. I couldn't connect to it at all yet. It's so acclaimed and well reviewed, so I accept that maybe I just didn't get it.
Christina, death and more death.
Yeah, there's very much. She was mentally ill. Actually, when she took her own life, she was on weekend leave from a mental institution in Buenos Aires. She was on weekend break from there.
That was in 1972, wasn't it? 1972. Yeah.
Yeah, she was only 36. The receptiveness and the darkness was definitely evocative of madness. Yeah, and she wrote at night. I mean, she in Paris, she would take these nighttime walks, and she would write away furiously in her room. And actually, the way that she wrote was very interesting. She had a chalkboard, a slate that would fit maybe 12 lines on it. And she would work on this one single poem at a time. She would never work on more than one. And, a lot of them are quite short, right? So she would write out lines, and then she would maybe cross something out, like a word, and come back the next day and put it, she sort of fussed over them. And she actually said that she never completes a poem. She'd never complete a poem. She only ever abandoned them, which is what a lot of artists say. Art is never completed. It's only ever abandoned, which was interesting that it was applied to her poetry. So she wrote in a very interesting way. She didn't use pen and paper for constructing her poems. Obviously, she committed them to notebooks eventually, but in the construction of the poem, they underwent all this sort of fragmenting bits together on this small chalkboard, which is really interesting.
Yeah. I've heard of poets that their body of work they've written on a wall in a room, and
wow,
yeah, just written on the wall, and that was their
Lisa Amber is here. A Crone's Intuition is here. Kimberly Meyer is here. So I'm just trying to see who else has popped in to say hello.
Hazel Jane Tarot says something quite interesting. Remind me of Beckett's prose, the spiral and struggle to stay, and the impossibility of reality reflecting with words. A lot of it seems to be about the process of writing.
Yeah. And Sunshine Dawn says, all of them seem sad and dark. She seemed to like the color blue and lilacs a lot. And it's interesting that you raised that, actually, because I've written a list of words or themes that come up really heavily in the poems. I read half of it, and these came up a lot. There's lots of stuff about the voice. So either being mute or using the voice or trying to get the voice out or singing. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of the color lilac or the lilacs as a flower. Obviously, death.
Can't hear you. Can't hear you. It says you're. That's it.
It's weird because it wasn't mute. It wasn't showing mute, and then after a few, I think there's a delay on the mute symbol. But I didn't press mute. It must have been accidental. So did you hear me talking about the color green?
Yeah. No, I didn't hear anything. You just completely went dead for a bit.
Did you hear me talking about singing?
No.
Oh, okay. Did you hear me talking about the things that feature heavily? Where I said I made a list?
I heard you made a list, and that you've made a list about
Okay.
colour. That's as far.
Oh,
Then
okay.
you won't.
So, yeah.
Then you won't mute.
Okay, so the list of things that show up quite heavily. So there's the thing about the voice. So there's a lots about trying to speak, being mute, and singing. That features a lot in her poems. The colour lilac, or the flowers lilac, turn up a lot in her poetry. Obviously, death, we've already talked about. She's obsessed with death. The colour green. So she talks a lot about green in relation to the forests, or the grove, or the grass, which I think is all about the fecundity. Like green is that fecundity and being returned to the earth, but to the soil and the things growing. I think that's where that comes from. Rivers and bodies of water seems to show up a lot. Again, rivers are associated, water is associated with death. You've got nighttime, which comes up a lot. Silence comes up a lot. And then lots of stuff about visions and dreams. She seems to have a very sort of surreal sort of imagination. And then other things that turn up, but not as much, is the colour grey. Masks and mask wearing, which is quite interesting. Walls or being closed off, and birds, imagery about birds or specific types of birds. So there's a lot about nature and
Dogs as well.
Sorry?
Dogs have featured as well, I've noticed.
What has?
Dogs.
Halt. What?
Dogs.
Oh, dogs. I couldn't work out what you were saying. G spells dog. I hadn't noticed that, actually. I think I've only seen a couple of poems with dogs in. I've got a dog over there on the bed.
Well, do you know what? The reason why I've been struggling, I've been shifting around so much, is because I'm fighting for space on this sofa.
Are your dog's taking up all the space, or is it Mabel?
It's Mabel. Look.
Mabel, what are you doing?
There she is.
What a space hogger. Mabel.
I know. So I've got like, it's barely got an inch on here. Hello, Nommy. Hey, Nommy. Nommy.
She's looking over to the speaker where she can hear your voice.
Hello, Nommy.
So yeah, I didn't realize the dog thing, but yeah, she's got a real sort of surreal, dreamlike quality to some of her poems, almost like they're half between, like in the hypnagogic state. They're sort of
that like this. The one that I mentioned about the dogs is the poem of Things Unseen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got this beautiful line at the start of it, which when I first read it, I thought, oh, I can get into this. So it begins like this, and then it goes. So the light of language covers me like music, which I thought was really beautiful.
Beautiful.
And then it says, like a picture ripped to shreds by the dogs of grief. And winter reaches for me like a woman who has fallen in love with a wall. Just when I'd hoped to give up hoping, your fall takes place within me. Now I am only but this within.
Yeah, it gets very sad, doesn't it?
It makes me wonder, well, obviously she had been, I think, planning her exit for years and years and years.
Oh, for sure. Just like Plath as well. Yeah. She'd even attempted, hadn't she?
Yeah. And it was just that right time, that right moment, and it was exit time. Which is, it's so sad. It's so sad when you actually read somebody's life descending and then ending abruptly. Then there's no more poems.
Yeah,
that's
really
it.
Sad.
Very
tragic ending to what was clearly a very troubled and quite solitary life. I couldn't really find any information about you know, any relationships or anything like that. I mean, we always assume like she might, for all we know, she might have been asexual. It doesn't sound like she was, because she does talk about having lovers and stuff, but yeah, she's more interested in writing about death than she is about sort of
she actually speaks very little about her personal life. She gives virtually nothing away about her personal life, except for in her poems. You all right then, Mabel? You got enough room?
Oh, she's just such a space hogger. I wanted to read one of like the other poems that the shorter ones, because we had Your Voice, which was one of the poems. I thought we could read that. And she says, ambushed in my writing, you are singing in my poem, captive of your sweet voice, engraved in my memory, bird intent on its flight, air tattooed by an absence, clock that keeps time with me so I never wake up. She's talking about, it sounds like she's missing someone, but also she talks a lot about, in her poems, some of her poems, her longer poems, about being the person that she used to be, or getting back to who she was, or maybe she's sort of thinking back to a time when she was happier. I don't know. So like you said, she could be talking about someone else, but she could also be talking about herself.
That's the mystery, because you know there's virtually nothing about her personal life, so it's very jumbled as well. I felt that it's just like, the way I see it is she's just poured the contents of her mind onto a piece of paper, and I don't know about you, but I know, you know, a lot of us, we have a whole bunch of stuff going on. For me, particularly when there's dark times, and you know, all these things clash, but there's always that kind of hope that this feeling will end and you will get back to where you were. You'll get back to that even keel rather than this dark place.
Yeah. Aquamarine 18 says Book Riot website has her book in an article named 5 Books from the LGBTQ Latin American Bookshelf. So that's interesting. Was she lesbian? Was she bi? That's interesting.
That kind of is what I got from this poem about the language.
Got that she writes for women quite a bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, she says, doesn't she, like, a winter reaches for me like a woman who has fallen in love with a wall.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
There's another poem here which was just so sad. It's called Shadows from Days to Come, and it's for Yvonne A. Baudelois. So for a French woman. I think Yvonne, or is Yvonne a man's name? It's Yvonne, it has an E on the end, makes me think it's a woman's name. It says, tomorrow, they'll dress me in ash for the sunrise. They'll fill my mouth with flowers. I'll learn to sleep inside the memory of a wall, on the breath of a dreaming animal. So it sounds like she's being laid to rest. It's really sad. But yeah, there's that imagery of flowers and of sleep and of walls again. You know, there's a lot of that. It's just so mournful. And yes, she was obviously just chronically depressed, incredibly, you know, as Elle said, it's like reading someone's like suicidal ideations. It's really, really sad.
There's a little quote here as well that she says. She says, I cannot speak with my voice, but I speak with my voices.
So indicates that she's I don't actually know whether she was obviously depressed, but I don't know if she had any other diagnosis past that. Obviously in the 60s and 70s the mental health care wasn't as advanced. I say advanced, wasn't as good as it is now, and obviously we still have a ways to go, but that's interesting.
It sounds more you know, it sounds more like it's like schizophrenia, like maybe that, because that is one of a component of schizophrenia is, you know, hearing voices, and
Yeah.
the way I saw that she cannot speak with my voice, but I speak with my voices. So um, maybe some of these poems were written by the other voices that she heard speaking to her in her head.
Yeah, I was just trying to work out what the phrase, the term used instead of schizophrenia is now, but I couldn't remember off the top of my head, because I know that that's not used as commonly. But that, I know what you mean, like where she's got multiple personalities potentially going on there.
You know, I was, you know, kind of thinking about that in her time, because like
totally. I was just saying, I was trying to think of the updated term because it was just bothering me. Science to Soul Tarot with Jen is here. Hello, Jen. Good to see you.
Hi.
Yeah, so it could be like disassociated. Yeah. And then who was it? Someone said, Kimberly Meyer said it's very goth. Now, as a actual goth, I would say it's not so. I mean, she does have. There are some gothic elements to her writing, and this is the thing. People think all goths are mopey. We're not all mopey. Goth people tend to err more on the side of things being tragical but romantical, a bit like Anne in Anne with an E. She's all like, oh, it's so romantical, but everything's really tragic. She's kind of like a goth. If she lived today, she'd totally be a goth. But I don't know what you mean, like it's dark, but I would say that bleak, goth is dark, but goth isn't necessarily bleak, just from someone from the subculture. So let's see, what else have we got? Dissociative, DID, dissociative identity disorder. Thank you, Elle, and read on Shy One. I knew someone would know. I just couldn't remember off the top of my head. So yeah, I'm just trying to work out if I had any other notes that I wanted to mention. Oh, there's the quote. There's a quote that I've got from Alejandra herself. Where she's writing a foreword or something about this book that she'd published. She wrote something called "From a Tradition in Rupture: Selected Critical Writings," and she says, "In opposition to the feeling of exile, the feeling of perpetual longing, stands the poem Promised Land. Every day my poems get shorter, little fires for the one who was lost in a strange land." Which is really, that's just from her herself, where she's talking about how her poems are getting smaller and her poems are promised land. So she's like trying to write herself or write her own, I don't know. It's just really, I don't know, it's just really sad.
Yeah.
And I don't actually sorry, go on.
No, there isn't really anything else to describe it. Is there?
No, mournful and sad, and sorry, I'm just grabbing some lip balm. The old lips are a bit dry from all the gassing. There we go. So yeah, it's definitely been a pretty tough read. I was just wondering if there was some other stuff that I had. There's lots of stuff where I've highlighted the color lilac. And in extracting the stone of madness, she's called it that. Apparently, I think it was the Greeks, Greek philosophers or Greek medical types believed that madness was a stone that was situated in the brain, in the head, in the skull, and that if you removed that stone, it would remove the madness from someone's mind. And that's where things like trepanning and stuff like that comes into play, because they were trying to like extract the stone. That's where that phrase comes from.
Because actually, you saying that there is a lot of archaeological evidence that when they found people's skulls, sometimes with actual squares cut out of the skull. So they've like attempted a little craniotomy.
Yeah.
What that was for, what they thought that was for, like you say, it could be that they were trying to extract.
Relieve pressure, to release humours, to release, demons, who knows? I just thought it was quite interesting. But she just, there's some really beautiful lines in this. And there was this one line in Extracting the Stone of Madness, which I really liked and was kind of relatable. It says, "How innocent you are. You wear the costume of a young assassin, yet you scare yourself in the mirror." And I'm like, I'm like, I'm a big scary goth, but I'm like actually really anxious and nervous all the time. I kind of just really related to that single sentence there. But yeah, she talks about, where is it? In Dream of Poetical Bodies. There, she talks about lilac ruins, lilac shrouds, ashes. The term ashes turns up a lot. Ashes, like dust to dust, I guess, again.
There's a poem which I've got right in front of me about lilac. Things that come to an end. This lilac unleaves, it falls from itself and hides its ancient shadow. I will die of such things. You've got reference to this like beautiful color lilac, and then death and shadow.
Yeah, it's there's actually a poem called "The Possessed Among the Lilacs" as well. So she's really lilac. I really noticed that color turned up. But someone said that mentioned earlier in the live chat what lilac was meant to sort of represent, but I can't remember who it was, and what they said it represented. It's already escaped my brain, unfortunately. But yeah, I'm just seeing if I can find any other ones that I sort of made notes on. There's one that is called "The Heart of What Does Exist," and it's really, really short. It's, "Do not hand me over, O saddest of midnights, to the impure whiteness of noon." I mean, if that doesn't talk about dreading the day that's coming, like being going into another day, yet another day, that relentless, like, trudge.
Did you
sometimes
come across the one, the paper doll that starts, the little paper doll?
I don't know. I've read so many in the first half of the book. Like, reading the second half of the book was overwhelming for me, but it rings a bell.
A lot about colour in this one. She says, the little paper doll, I cut out of her green and red and sky blue paper, and she lay flat on the floor, extreme in her lack of volume or dimension. They set you in the middle of the road, little wanderer, and you are in the middle of the road where no one can identify you. I was really confused by that.
It's really, really sad. This girl that has no substance to her. She talks a lot about the bodies of dead girls, or the dolls and stuff like that. That does feature a bit as well. And I think that's, I don't know, just again, maybe writing about herself and about the loss of innocence, or I don't know, just really, really, it's just really, really sad. And then there's like a poem called Green Paradise. So yeah, there's colors that feature in the title of her songs as well, her poems as well. So yeah,
and some of them, sorry,
no, I was gonna say, go on.
I was just gonna say that some of them were that they were actually published posthumously, so after her death. And this is quite interesting. So of the 7 books contained in this volume, 3 were posthumously published. The dedications on these books and many of the poems contained within them served as concrete gestures outside the speaker's contained introspection, each a farewell from a poet. And one of the last ones she actually wrote is, at the center of absence, my shadow is the center of the poem.
Oh, that's really sad. They just the fact that there was 3 volumes published posthumously, and actually I didn't find a huge amount of information about her. I think her bio video was one of the shortest that I've actually made. Obviously there's a lot more available in Spanish, but reading full articles in Spanish was a bit beyond my ken, to be honest, these days. But yeah, it's just really, she did, there's this book, and then there's 1 or 2 others that have been translated, both of them by this Yvette Siegert, and one by someone else as well, which are supposed to be a lot published after she died, so she left a lot behind. There's actually a poem here in the later part of the book which I hadn't read, but I had spotted it, and it's called Tabula Rasa, which is interesting because that means like a blank slate to start over again. And it's all about memory. There's actually Buffy the Vampire Slayer episode called Tabula Rasa, featuring Willow and Tara. If anyone knows what I'm talking about on that one, they will know what I mean. But yeah, and it's all about memory and forgetting and blank slates. But yeah, there's just even the things that she's named the poems. There's a poem about silence called Silences. She says, death always at my side. I listen to what it says and only hear myself. I mean, oof. Hello, Kay. Lovely to see you pop in. And Janet Hanson. Hello. She said, I've actually made it to a live for once. Well, welcome. Hey. And then there's one called I Ask for Silence. So there's this thing where these themes are, again, where I was saying where silence comes along. She says, though it's late, though it's night, and you are not able, sing as if nothing were wrong. Nothing is wrong. And it's almost like pretending to yourself that everything's going to be okay, like she's trying to like convince herself. It's just heartbreaking stuff.
There is interesting enough there, she talks about there's a painting by Hieronymus Bosch called Extracting the Stone of Madness.
Yes, there is. You're right.
And there's an actual picture. There's a picture here, which I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but it demonstrates what you were saying about. Can you see that at all?
I can just about make it. Kind
Hang
of.
On, I'll turn the brightness
sitting down.
But yeah, they're actually in the painting. They're actually going into.
Yes, drilling
his
into
head,
his old bonds.
Extracting the Stone of Madness, and that's what the painting's actually called, that, which I thought was, quite interesting.
Read on Shy One says a really interesting thing about the sort of the repetition of dolls being used. And they say, I think dolls are an empty shell. The poem partly talks about calling for help and not being heard or seen, most like a wallflower and paper doll. So that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, 36 is really no age, is it, really?
No, not at all. So do we want to have a look at the cards, the object cards? Have you picked any out?
Yes, I have, but to be honest, out of all these cards, I struggled, because the only one that came to mind for me, and I'm not sure if it's actually her card, but it's the claw. Hang on.
Ooh, excuse me. Excuse me.
So I got, oh, where is it? You're like me, I jumbled all these cards up before I came on, which is not helpful. Here we are.
Show mine while you find. Oh, you've got them. Okay, cool.
No, that's okay. You show yours. You show yours, and I'll show you mine.
I've got the moon, like I did last month as well, just because she spent so much time talking about the night, and she actually talks about moonlight in her poems. I've got the wolf, because the wolf features in some of her poems, and she also was a loner, so think of the lone wolf. And then the skull, again, because she was obsessed with bones and death and bodies, and she talks about torsos and limbs and skulls and stuff. So
yeah,
quite relevant, I think. What about you? What have you got?
Well, I got a snap for the skull for obvious reasons, as you said. But for some reason, I gravitated towards this, which is the creature's paw. Now, I know it's probably connected to another poem, but it seemed to me like this was hanging over her head the whole time. This, not a creature, but this kind of thing, this mood, this mental state that had got this like a grip on her. I imagine like walking with this like fixed to her, and she could not shake it off no matter what. So you know, can you imagine that? Like every time she tried to get out of and dream of something better, as she mentioned, this would like hold on to her shoulder and pull her back down. So that was mine.
Oh yeah, that really makes sense. This claw digging into her, having a grip on her constantly. That's really, really sad. Smith, the mystical lady, hello, says, I really need a list of all the regular lives. I seem to miss them even with the bell icon checked. Hello. We tend to generally, as a rule, do the last Friday of the month. So sometimes that means we have more or less time to read the book, depending on the month. Obviously, last month, well, not obviously, you might not know, we had technical difficulties and then rescheduled for the Sunday of the same weekend. But we do try to get it on the last Friday of the month. So if that helps, at 9 p.m. British summertime, but obviously that will change in October back to Greenwich Mean Time, but we'll let you know about that. So I can see you're already shuffling there. Are you
I was shuffling away whilst I was
every day. I'm shuffling.
I was just looking at the comments. I really hope
that we get something light-hearted. Okay, me too. But there's a lot of darkness going on in this deck as well, a lot of sadness. But unless you get the one that you've been wanting, which will be pretty heavy, but also really interesting, because you specifically really wanted a certain Australian writer. So
right, come on, universe. I always say that, but I don't really know what I mean by the universe. You know, what is the universe?
The big giant head.
How can the universe actually? Right, are you ready, kids? Here we go.
Ready?
Cutting in half, and we have.
It's exciting.
Oh, Emily Dickinson.
Oh, okay. An oldie but a goodie. Yes. Okay. I can get down with Emily Dickinson. There's been a couple of films about her lately as well, which look good. Especially that one where they actually admit that she was like a raging lesbian.
Oh, cool.
Let's be honest. She wasn't. People made that like she was really boring. She wasn't. She was actually quite a cool lady, it seems. So yeah, I'm stoked. That's exciting. Yeah. A classic.
Me too.
So let's have a look at Emily Dickinson in Zook. I think this is our first proper like going back to the early 1800s writer. Like we've had later 1800s and early 20th century, but we've not had until now one of the older classics that you would probably learn about at school. I'm
trying to find her in the book.
She is page 53. Oh, there's the card. It's in the book. I was put it in there for the chat and forgot that I put it in there for the chat, but there we go. So page 53. Doopy doopy doo. There she is.
Recommended
the poems of
reading.
Emily Dickinson. Yes, we've got the tome, which is the poems of Emily Dickinson, which is probably quite a lot. The Carry With You Everywhere, which I like the thought of. Dickensian poems. Everyman Library pocketbooks, or it says to start here, and then it gives you a list of poems. So there's Wild Nights. I Felt a Funeral in My Brain, which, let's be honest, sounds like the title of a B movie that would be riffed by MST3K, right? I Dwell in Possibility. The Moon is Distant from the Sea. I mean, well, that's obvious, but okay. There's a Certain Slant of Light. Fame is a Fickle Food. You Left Me, Sire, Two Legacies, and The World Is Not Concluded. Okay, so there's quite a lot of poems there.
There is.
So I think I might try and get a small collection of her poetry and then just literally just read the poems that are listed in the book.
Which book?
Is that what it takes to be published? Well, there's one that's called The Carry With You Everywhere book, which is Dickinson. I said Dickensian. That's the TV show the BBC did where they put all the Dickinson poems. Sorry, I was thinking Dickinson poems by Everyman's Library pocketbooks. So that might be a good one because it's a wee volume. And then what I'll do is when I do the bio video and also when I announce it on the Doobly, the Instagrams and stuff, I will also list the poems. So you don't necessarily have to buy a book. You can probably find all of these online available because copyright is probably long gone and it's Emily Dickinson, right? So she's used a lot in schools. Hope is a Thing with Feathers sounds interesting, says someone.
Just looking her up on Audible.
Fairy Wren Whispers, that's such a nice name. Hope is the Thing with Feathers is their fave. So that's really cool. Was that on the list here? No. So I'm going to put on the list Hope is a Thing with Feathers.
So is that's
a poem that's somewhat Fairy Wren and who else has said is their fave.
When you go into Audible, there's reams and reams for Emily Dickinson.
Yeah, there will be.
Complete collection, 50 poems. Hope is a Thing
with Feathers. That's what's Fairy Wren has recommended.
Shaggy Muses.
Fairy Wren, Hope is a Thing with Feathers. Is that actually a collection of poems, do you mean? That's the title of the book, Complete Works. The Laura says that the Canadian Amazon has the Dickinson Poems Everyman's Library one. I'm just going to probably go for the slim collection. Her poems have no titles. What? I never realised that. Even How Do I Love You? Let Me Count the Ways I Love You to the. Does that not have a title? Yeah, I think it's off copyright, Laura, because it's so old. Let's have a look. Gutenberg Project has lots of free Dickens ebooks. There you go, for people who want to just read those. Let me just go and have a look at Usual Suspects and see if I find. Oh, come on, Tinterweb, don't be
terribly
slow.
sorry, but I'm going to have to nip to the toilet.
That's all right. You pop off.
I'm busting.
I'm just going to see if I can find. You go. I thought it was going to be me that needed to go off.
I know.
Or for a slush, Eddie. And you. I hear Flybuzz when I died is possibly her most famous. No, she never had title. Oh, Fairy Wren in all my. I was today years old when I found that out. Thank you for educating on me. How have I not known that? Holy poo balls. Okay. That's interesting. How bizarre that she's not named any of it. Like, don't make it easy for anyone. Like, oh, Emily, could you recite us that poem? You know, that one. Oh, yes. I'm just going to see if I can find, what was it called? Dickinson poems. I always want to say Dickinson because I'm 5. Emily Dickinson, which is just really immature.
Did I hear?
There's going to be so many books. I'm just going to be overwhelmed.
Did I hear you quote "absolutely fabulous" just before I went to the toilet?
Quote.
I'm going for a slash, Eddie.
Oh, slash Eddie.
Yeah. Yeah. God, I love her.
Yeah. Because that's what Patsy would go going for slash.
Yeah,
she's awesome.
Do you know what? Inside,
she's good fun.
Inside, I'm a Patsy, but that's just on the inside, you know. Do you ever get that? Like on the inside, you've got that person that you want to be.
Yeah. I can yeah, like there's someone, like for me the person I most relate to at the moment is like David Rose from Schitt's Creek, because he's as sarky as I used to be when I was younger, and he's got that whole thing like I have a really good eye, and he's very like whereas I've gotten less as I got older because I realise it's not nice to be like that, but I still have an inner David, and he does come out every now and then. So the ISBN for the Carry Everywhere one that they were talking about, so ISBN is 978-0679 429074. Let me read that out again.
Where are you seeing that?
I've clicked. It's Laura Aquamarine 18 has shared it. 0679429074. Cool beans. So I'll have to look that up and see what we can get. The collected poems of Emily Dickinson, published by Barnes and Noble, paperback, is compact book of her poems and cheap. Okay, that's another one. Fairy Wren, that one that you were talking about, the Hope is a Thing with Feathers, was that the given title of a poem that people have given, or was that a title of a collection of books? I love David. Simon says. Oh my God, Simon says. I too. I've just watched another 2 episodes this evening before, and I was crying. I haven't finished season 6 though. I've got like 5 episodes left. So don't give me any spoilers. The Collected.
And I've got Simon to thank for me being riveted to my laptop watching The Fall. You suggested that, Simon. I couldn't stop watching it. I couldn't stop.
I watched all that when that was on the Beeb. That was all on the BBC. I'm so glad that it's become available again. But Gillian Anderson is the absolute fucking shit in that show. And I don't know what series you're on, but have you seen the one where the guy comes over to hit on her and someone with the drink, and she's nipped to the loo and she comes back? You'll know it when you see it. It is so good. I'm like, she is such a queen. Simon will know what I mean.
I didn't see that. I need to. I'll probably get to it. But on BBC iPlayer is something called The Quiz, and it's a drama about the guy that cheated on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
Oh, Nick. No,
with the top.
Yes, that was years ago.
I know, but there's a drama on there on the BBC iPlayer called The Quiz. And it's
I didn't know that.
It's really good.
Oh, okay. Sorry, Fairy Wren. I get it now. Sorry. Thanks, Fairy Wren, for the clarification on that. Okay, so is that a cat or is that a stoat or a weasel or something in the picture?
It looks like
Looks like a stoat or a weasel.
Yeah, it's one
or
of
an
those
otter.
things. Or a mink or something
I guess
like
I
that.
could just ask Katie Horan what she painted. I could just ask her. But yeah, the quiz. I've not seen that. I do know I do know that Lost Boys was on iPlayer, but I haven't seen if it's gone off yet, or because I wanted to watch that this weekend because nostalgia. Anyway, wow, that was really off topic talking about Lost Boys and stuff. But that's okay. It's how it goes. It's 10:05, so we should wrap this up. Becca, you've picked a doozy. Next month, we will be picking the author for October. Now, me and Becca have discussed this, and I think I have mentioned this.
Yeah.
Because it is October, and I don't know about you folks, but I live for spooky season. Like, it's spooky all year round for me, but Halloween, October, Weenmas, as I call the month of October, is super important to me. And I really feel like we should kind of like have a spooky bitch for our author. And so we were talking about Shirley Jackson or Mary Shelley. And I kind of it does look like a ferret, Debbie. So I'm leaning towards Mary Shelley because I really enjoy the idea of researching. I know quite a bit about her already, but like she's like in my mind she's the OG goth girl, and I just wanted just an excuse to just dig into researching more about her and her relationship and about her. Like she's just spooky as hell, and there's lots of juicy tidbits about her.
I mean, Frankenstein, right?
She wrote Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus, and she essentially wrote the first ever sci-fi. She invented the genre. So yes, queen. So we will be doing the live chat for Emily Dickinson at the end of September, which feels like ages away, but it won't be. And I'm just trying to work out what the date would be. But my computer is being a poo head and being really slow, so it might be easy to just do it on my phone because my phone is quicker than my old laptop now. So it would probably be Friday the 25th of September. Oh, I've got in my calendar that I'm meant to be on a photo shoot that day, but obviously COVID, it's been, that's not happening anymore. So wow. So Friday the 25th of September, if that would be cool with you, Becca.
Absolutely.
And so that gives us 1, 2, 3. That gives us 4 weeks today to read just a handful of poems. We can do that. And Janet says, I have this project, ladies. Thank you so much. And Kristen says, if you choose Mary Shelley, the Norton critical edition of Frankenstein has a lot of history about her and all the other criticism of the story. I've actually already got a copy of Frankenstein, and I think it might be a Penguin classic, so I'll probably just read that one just cause. Shelley on Netflix, isn't that one with not Shelley, isn't it called? Oh, isn't it the one with Maisie Williams or something?
I've watched
the first
it.
little bit of it.
I've watched it.
Is it worth watching? Because I watched the first 15 minutes and couldn't get into it.
I thought it was definitely worth watching. It's quite sad, but it kind of brings her to life a little bit. Her story rather than her writings.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, thank you, as always, Becca, for allowing me to piggyback on your Friday evening live.
Oh, you're welcome.
It's very generous of you, and for agreeing to, even though we both struggled with this, for agreeing to, still do the live. And and for just joining in, and to everyone else that's been joining in along the way. We've had some new people pop on as well, which has been really cool. So yeah, what's that? That's fine too, of course. Would be nice to specify which it is though, because there's an original 1818 version and her version where she went back to add. Oh, we'll have to work out. Well, I think as long as we've got the main crux of the story, it'll be okay, because I think people will be able to get hold of different versions. But I'll let you folks know what copy you're reading it in. So yeah, thank you everyone.
Thank you.
I actually feel like I feel like I've just dropped the extracting the stone of madness on the floor. But I actually feel, having discussed this a bit more and talking about her a bit more and with everyone else, it's made me feel like I want to persist. I just think I wasn't in the right headspace, and the last couple of days I've come to appreciate her a bit more than I was, just because I think I had a bit more context. But I think she's one of those that Alexandra Pizarnik is one that you sort of sit with. It's not something you can, she's too rich to eat all in one sitting. You have to savor, I think.
Yeah. And a month really is not enough, is it? But we did it.
No. Yeah, we did it. We did the thing. So keep your peepers peeled for the Emily Dickinson bio, which I will endeavour to have up by the end of next week, because it's usually quite a lot of research for me and stuff. Yeah, and we'll see you hopefully next time for the live chat. So speak to you all soon. Take care of yourselves. Have an awesome weekend. Be safe.
Bye.
Wear your mask. Bye.
Bye.